Hi there, this is Jonathan Ginsberg. I'm a Social Security disability attorney, and today I'd like to talk to you about winning strategies I use when I'm dealing with a case involving anxiety. And obviously anxiety and depression, sometimes bipolar, go hand in hand, but sometimes you'll have a situation where your doctor has diagnosed you with anxiety disorder. Perhaps you're having panic attacks, difficulty, even PTSD can be part of this, where you've got to argue that you cannot work anymore. You're not able to be a reliable employee because of anxiety disorder. And here's how I approach that. Basically, there are two ways you can win an anxiety case. One is you can argue that you meet a listing, and the listing is 12.06. Or the second way is you can argue that your functional capacity for work has been so reduced by your symptoms and perhaps medication side effects that you would not be a reliable employee. The grid rules are not going to apply to an anxiety-only case because the grid rules basically focus on physical limitations. So you've got to have a physical problem to meet the grid rules. Now, if you have a physical issue along with anxiety disorder, you could bring the grid rules in and you could argue that your anxiety makes your physical capacity even more reduced. But if you're purely anxiety, if there's no physical issues going on, then you can only use the listing or functional capacity. And basically, both the listing and the functional capacity arguments are somewhat similar. There's not a whole lot of difference. It really, in many cases, just turns on the amount of evidence and the quality of evidence you have. So if you look at listing 12.06, you will see that it focuses mostly on recurrent panic attacks, obsessions, obsessive compulsive behavior, typically brought about by some sort of stimuli that brings back bad memories, intrusive recollections of a traumatic event. And that's typically what the listing is looking for. My experience has been that judges, if they're going to approve in the listing, they're going to want to see one or more inpatient hospitalizations. They're going to want to see one or more suicide attempts, and not just thoughts about it, but actually suicide attempts. They're going to want to see long-term treatment records, ideally from the same doctor or maybe no more than one or two doctors, but they're going to want to see long treatment records. They're going to want to see support from a doctor in the form of a functional capacity evaluation or a statement on the listing or a narrative report. But again, really strong support from your doctor. They're going to want to know if you are claiming PTSD as sort of the source. They're going to want to know what the traumatic event was, why there's what's post-traumatic, what the trauma was. And typically they're looking for, in a listing level case, sexual abuse, often from childhood, or it could be young adulthood, physical trauma, physical abuse, maybe from a bad relationship that lasted for months or years, combat experience in the military where you were exposed to high levels of stress in a combat situation for weeks or months at a time, severe physical abuse. It could be another traumatic event such as the loss of a child. I've had a couple of cases like that, the loss of a child, or being next to somebody who was hit by a bullet or run over by a car, something that's really very, very real that you experienced. And so that's kind of the listing level type of evidence you're going to need. And again, meeting the 12.06 listing is not going to be easy. You're going to need, again, very, very strong medical evidence and strong support from your doctor. And some judges, quite frankly, are more comfortable approving anxiety cases on a functional capacity argument as opposed to the listing. I've had some judges suggest, not really quite come out and say it, but suggest that if it's listing level, they expect the state agency, the adjudicators, to find listing level impairment. They're going to focus more on the functional capacity element. And of course, functional capacity is our second way to win an anxiety case. And essentially what that looks at is all the factors, not just specifically what the listing talks about, but looking at you holistically to determine whether or not you would be able to function reliably in a competitive work environment. So again, the same sort of thing. They're going to look for psychiatric hospitalizations. They're going to look for suicide attempts, long-term treatment records, support from your doctor. You may not have all that. You may not have a suicide attempt. You may not have an inpatient hospitalization. So that may take you out of the listing level, but you still could argue functional capacity. And again, I think what you're going to need there is additional evidence. What I find works for me would be evidence perhaps from a former coworker or supervisor that described problems you were having at a job, specifically issues you had with leaving early or missing too much time from work or relying on coworkers to loan you leave time, or who would cover for you, or who would bring you home when you couldn't make it. Employment records from a past job showing that you missed a lot of time, and by a lot of time would be a day or two a week, especially towards the end of your tenure. So you can use that type of thing. Again, statements from coworkers and supervisors describing the problems you were having at work, crying spells, or periods where you just were not focused at all and couldn't get the work done. That's especially important from a supervisor. I think problems keeping a schedule up, keeping your tasks up to speed, all those type of things would be helpful in an affidavit from a coworker or supervisor. And of course, you're definitely going to need in a functional capacity argument strong support from a treating doctor in the form of a functional capacity evaluation. They sometimes call it RFC, or residual functional capacity evaluation, or a statement, a narrative report that really describes the vocational implications of your symptoms. Perhaps your doctor could talk about medication side effects as well, that they make you drowsy, difficult to focus, and so forth. So again, you can be a little more creative when you're dealing with functional capacity, again, getting statements from coworkers and supervisors. And I don't think it needs to be an either or. I think the more you can build your case by getting all this evidence, third-party statements, maybe even statements from somebody, friend or relative who sees you, who can describe what you're going through, describe what happens in the course of a day, difficulty you may have keeping a routine during the day, cooking dinner, cleaning the house, being reliable, because I think this is really mostly about reliability. And when you have severe anxiety disorder, it can be difficult to be reliable on an ongoing basis. You may have a couple of good days, but then you may have a couple of days where you can't get out of bed, don't bathe, don't take care of basic necessities. So that can be something that a friend or a relative or a coworker could put in an affidavit. And of course, as the attorney, I would help draft that affidavit. I would help to talk to the person, the potential witness, and get statements, and then put it in an affidavit form and use that as an exhibit. So that's really what I do when I'm creating an argument for an anxiety case, because I want all that evidence in the record. So when I pose my hypothetical question to the vocational witness, I can include all those things. And again, the result would be that the vocational witness will testify that there are no jobs if those symptoms are accepted as true. And of course, we want the judge to pose the hypothetical question, so he'll come to that same conclusion. So that's how I focus and create an anxiety disorder argument. Again, these cases can be challenging because there's no real objective test for it, but if you have all your medical evidence, you've got other evidence, supporting evidence, and documentation in the form of work records or test results from a mental health professional, along with strong support from a psychologist or psychiatrist, these cases can be very viable and you can win them. So that's how I approach them. Hope you found this helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube or a like on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page. And if you have any questions about this or anything else related to Social Security disability, please let me know. Thanks a lot.